Hello everyone! Today we will have a new lesson about programming languages that start with letter P. P. P is a programming language for asynchronous event-driven programming and the IoT that was developed by Microsoft and University of California, Berkeley. P enables programmers to specify systems consisting of a collection of state machines that communicate asynchronously in terms of events. Code can be run on Microsoft Windows and Windows Phone and is now open source licensed under MIT license and available on GitHub. P4 P4 is a programming language for controlling packet forwarding planes and networking devices, such as routers and switches. In contrast to a general-purpose language such as C or Python, P4 is a domain-specific language with a number of constructs optimized for network data forwarding. P4 is distributed as open source, permissively licensed code and is maintained by the P4 Language Consortium, a not-for-profit organization. The programming language P4 was originally described in a SIGCOMM CCR paper in 2014 titled Programming Protocol Independent Packet Processors. The alliterative name shortens to P4. The first P4 workshop took place in June 2015 at Stanford University. An updated specification of P4, called P416, was released between 2016 and 2017, replacing original specification of P4 called P414. P double prime. P double prime is a primitive computer programming language created by Corrado Bohm in 1964 to describe a family of Turing machines. PARSEL programming language. Parallel specification and implementation language or PARSEL is an object-oriented parallel programming language. Its design and ongoing is described in a blog and on its official website. Initial design of PARSEL began in September 2009 by Stoker Tuck. PARI GP. PARI GP is a computer algebra system with the main aim of facilitating number theory computations. It runs on most common operating systems. The PARI GP system is a package that is capable of doing formal computations on recursive types at high speed. It is primarily aimed at number theorists. Its three main strengths are its speed, the possibility of directly using data types that are familiar to mathematicians, and its extensive algebraic number theory module. Pascal under ISO 7185. Pascal is an imperative and procedural programming language designed by Nicholas Wirth as a small, efficient language intended to encourage good programming practices using structured programming and data structuring. It is named in honor of the French mathematician, philosopher, and physicist Blaise Pascal. Pascal was influenced by the Algol W efforts with the explicit goals of producing a language that would be efficient both in the compiler and at runtime, allow for the development of well-structured programs, and to be useful for teaching students structured programming. A generation of students use Pascal as an introductory language in undergraduate courses. Pascal Script. Pascal Script is a scripting language based on the programming language Pascal that facilitates automated runtime control over scriptable applications and server software. It is implemented by a free scripting engine that includes a compiler and an interpreter for bytecode. Pascal Script supports the majority of Object Pascal constructs, making it partly compatible to Delphi, Free Pascal, and GNU Pascal. PCASTL. PCASTL, an acronym for by parent and child set accessible syntax tree language, is an interpreted high-level programming language. It was created in 2008 by Philippe Jacquard. The PCASTL is designed to ease the writing of self-modifying code. The language has to serve both parent and child set to access the nodes of the syntax tree of the currently written code. PCF. In computer science, programming computable functions, or PCF, is a type functional language introduced by Gordon Plotkin in 1977, based on previous unpublished material by Donna Scott. It can be considered to be an extended version of the type lambda calculus or a simplified version of modern type functional languages such as ML or Haskell. A fully abstract model for PCF was first given by Milner 1977. However, since Milner's model was essentially based on the syntax of PCF, it was considered less than satisfactory. Perl. Perl, or Process and Experiment Automation Real-Time Language, is a computer programming language designed for multitasking and real-time programming. Being a high-level language, it is a fairly cross-platform. Since 1977, the language has been going under several standardization steps by the Dutch Institute for Normal. The current version is Perl 90, which was standardized in 1998 as DIN 66253-2. PeopleCode. PeopleCode is a proprietary object-oriented programming language used to express business logic for PeopleSoft applications. Syntactically, PeopleCode is similar to other programming languages and can be found in both loosely typed and strongly typed forms. PeopleCode and its runtime environment is part of the larger PeopleTools framework. PeopleCode has evolved over time and its implementation through the PeopleSoft applications lack consistency. PeopleCode offers some interoperability with the Java programming language. Perl. Perl is a family of two high-level general-purpose interpreted dynamic programming languages. Perl refers to Perl by, but from 2000 to 2019, it also referred to its redesigned sister language, Perl 6, before the latter's name was officially changed to Raku in October 2019. Though Perl is not officially an acronym, there are various backronyms in use, including Practical Extraction and Reporting Language. Perl was originally developed by Larry Wall in 1987 as a general-purpose Unix scripting language to make report processing easier. Since then, it has undergone many changes and revisions. Raku, which began as a redesign of Perl 5 in 2000, eventually evolved into a separate language. Both languages continue to be developed independently by different development teams and liberally borrow ideas from one another. PDL. Perl Data Language, abbreviated as PDL, is a set of free software array programming extensions to the Perl programming language. PDL extends the data structures built into Perl to include large multidimensional arrays and adds functionality to manipulate those arrays as vector objects. It also provides tools for image processing, machine learning, computer modeling of physical systems, and graphical plotting and presentation. Pharo. Pharo is an open-source dynamic and reflective language which is inspired by the programming language Smalltalk. Pharo offers several live programming features such as immediate object manipulation, live update, and hat-trick compiling. Pharo is a pure object-oriented, dynamically typed, and reflective language. The stated goal of Pharo is to revisit Smalltalk design and enhance it. The name Pharo comes from the French word "pare", which means lighthouse. This is why the Pharo logo shows a drawing of a lighthouse inside the final letter O of the name. PHP. PHP is a general-purpose scripting language especially suited to web development. It was originally created by Danish-Canadian programmer Rasmus Lerdorf in 1994. The PHP reference implementation is now produced by the PHP Group. PHP originally stood for Personal Homepage, but it now stands for the Recursive Initialism PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. PHP development began in 1994 when Rasmus Lerdorf wrote several Common Gateway Interface or CGI programs in C, which he used to maintain his personal homepage. He extended them to work with web forms and to communicate with databases and called this implementation Personal Homepage or Forms Interpreter or PHPFI. Pico. Pico is a programming language developed at the Software Languages Lab at Breda University, Brazil. The language was created to introduce the essentials of programming to non-computer science students. Pico can be seen as an effort to generate a palatable, enjoyable language for people who do not want to study hard for the elegance and power of a language. They have done it by adapting scheme semantics. While designing Pico, the Software Languages Lab was inspired by the Abelson and Sussman structure and interpretation of computer programs. Furthermore, they were influenced by the teaching of programming at high school or academic level. Pico should be interpreted as small. The idea was to create a small language for educational purposes. Picolisp. Picolisp is a programming language, a dialect of the language Lisp. It runs on operating systems including Linux and others that are Portable Operating System Interface or POSIX compliant. It is built on one internal data type, a cell. On the language level, a programmer can use three different data types, such as numbers, symbols, and lists, being represented by cells and differentiated by bits at the end of the cell. It is free and open source software released under an MIT license X11. Pict. Pict is a statically typed programming language, one of the very few based on the Pike calculus. Work on the language began at the University of Edinburgh in 1992, and development has been more or less dormant since 1998. The language is still at an experimental stage. Pike. Pike is an interpreted general-purpose, high-level, cross-platform dynamic programming language with a syntax similar to that of C. Unlike many other dynamic languages, Pike is both statically and dynamically typed and requires explicit type definitions. It features a flexible type system that allows the rapid development and flexible code of dynamically typed languages while still providing some of the benefits of a statically typed language. Pike features garbage collection advanced data types and first-class anonymous functions with support for many programming paradigms, including object-oriented, functional, and imperative programming. Pike is a free software release under the GPL, LGPL, and MPL licenses. Pilot. Programmed Inquiry, Learning, or Teaching, or Pilot, is a simple high-level programming language developed in the 1960s. Like its younger sibling Logo, it was an early foray into the technology of computer-assisted instruction. Pilot is an imperative language similar in structure to BASIC and Fortran in its basic layout and structure. Its keywords are single characters, T for type, to print text, or A for accept, to input values from the user. Pilot was developed by John Amsden Starkweather, a psychology professor at the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center. In 1962, he developed a simple language for automating learning tests called CompuTest. Starting in 1968, he developed a follow-on project called Pilot for various computers of the time, such as the SDS-940. Pipelines. CMS Pipelines implements the pipeline concept under the VM CMS operating system. The programs in a pipeline operate on a sequential stream of records. A program writes records that are read by the next program in the pipeline. Any program can be combined with any other because reading and writing is done through a device-independent interface. CMS Pipelines provides a CMS command, pipe. The argument string to the pipe command is the pipeline specification. Pizza. Pizza is an open-source superset of Java 1.4 prior to the introduction of generics for the Java programming language. In addition to its own solution for adding generics to the language, Pizza also added function pointers and algebraic types with case classes and pattern matching. In August 2001, the developers made the compiler capable of working with Java. Most Pizza applications can run in a Java environment, but certain cases will cause problems. Work on Pizza more or less stopped in 2002. Its main developers turned their focus afterwards to the generic Java project, another attempt to add generics to Java that was officially adopted as a version 5 of the language. PL11. PL11 is a high-level machine-oriented programming language for the PDP-11 developed by R.D. Russell of CERN in 1971. PL11 was originally developed as part of the Omega project, a particle physics facility operational at CERN, like Geneva, Switzerland, during the 1970s. The first version was written for the CII 10070, a clone of the XDS Sigma 7 built in France. Towards the end of the 1970s, it was ported to the IBM 370-168, then part of CERN's Computer Center. PL0. PL0 is a programming language intended as an educational programming language that is similar to but much simpler than Pascal. A general-purpose programming language, it serves as an example of how to construct a compiler. It was originally introduced in the book Algorithms plus Data Structures equals Programs by Nicholas Wirth in 1976. It features quiet, limited language constructs. There are no real numbers, very few basic arithmetic operations, and no conceptual constructs other than if and while blocks. While these limitations make writing real applications in this language impractical, it helps the compiler remain compact and simple. PLB Programming Language for Business or PLB is a business-oriented programming language originally called Databus and designed by DataPoint in 1972 as an alternative to COBOL because DataPoint's 8-bit computers could not fit COBOL into their limited memory. A version of Databus became an ANSI standard, and the name PLB came about when DataPoint chose not to release its trademark on the Databus name. PLC PLC is an instructional dialect of the PLI computer programming language developed at Cornell University in the 1970s. PLC was developed with the specific goal of being used for teaching programming. It is based on IBM's PLI language. Work on this project was based on a prior kernel compiler for a language named CUPL or Cornell University Programming Language. One reason why PLC was widely used in college-level programming courses was its avoidance of a known problem named cascading diagnostics, wherein one error is fixed and results in a secondary, tertiary, and onward series of error messages. The two researchers and academic teachers who designed PLC were Richard W. Conway and Thomas R. Wilcox. They submitted the famous article Design and Implementation of a Diagnostic Compiler for PLI, published in the Communications of ACM in March 1973, pages 169 to 179. PLI under ISO 6160. PL1, or Programming Language, sometimes written PL1, is a procedural imperative computer programming language developed and published by IBM. It is designed for scientific, engineering, business, and system programming. It has been used by academic, commercial, and industrial organizations since it was introduced in the 1960s and it is still used. PL1's main domains are data processing, numerical computation, scientific computing, and system programming. It supports recursion, structured programming, linked data structure handling, fixed point, floating point, complex, character string handling, and bit string handling. The language syntax is English-like and suited for describing complex data formats with a wide set of functions available to verify and manipulate them. PLM. The PLM programming language, an acronym of Programming Language for Microcomputers, is a high-level language conceived and developed by Gary Kildall in 1973 for Hank Smith at Intel for its microprocessors. PLP. The PLP programming language, an acronym of Programming Language for Prime or Computers, is a mid-level programming language developed by Prime Computer to serve as their second primary system programming language after Fortran 4. PLP was a subset of PL1. Additions to the Primus operating system for Prime 50 series computers were written mostly in PLP in later years. Certain Primus modules written in Fortran 4 during Primus' early years were written in PLP. PLP was the most widespread compiled programming language used for commercial Primus applications, outpacing the use of the Prime-C compiler, the CPL or Primus scripting language, and the Fortran 4 compiler in commercial applications. PLSQL. PLSQL, or Procedural Language for SQL, is Oracle Corporation's procedural extension for SQL and the Oracle Relational Database. PLSQL is available on Oracle Database since version 6 stored PLSQL procedures, functions, packages, triggers since version 7, times 10 in-memory database since version 11.2.1, and IBM DB2 since version 9.7. Oracle Corporation usually extends PLSQL functionality with each successive release of the Oracle database. PL360. PL360 is a system programming language designed by Nicholas Wirth and written by Nicholas Wirth, Joseph W. Wells Jr., and Edwin Satterthwaite Jr. for the IBM System 360 computer at Stanford University. A description of PL360 was published in early 1968, although the implementation was probably completed before Wirth left Stanford in 1967. PLANC. PLANC, pronounced as PLANC, is a high-level computer programming language. The acronym stands for Programming Language for ND Computers. The language was designed to be platform-dependent. It was mainly used internally at North Data for writing high-level system software such as the upper parts of the operating systems and compilers. Plankalkül. Plankalkül is a programming language designed for engineering purposes by Konrad Zuse between 1942 and 1945. It was the first high-level programming language to be designed for a computer. Kalkül is the German term for a formal system, as in Hilbert Kalkül, the original name for the Hilbert-style deduction system, so Plankalkül refers to a formal system for planning. Planner. Planner, often seen in publication as Planner, although it is not an acronym, is a programming language designed by Carl Hewitt at MIT and first published in 1969. First, subsets such as microplanner and picoplanner were implemented, and then essentially the whole language was implemented as Poplar by Julian Davis at the University of Edinburgh in the PAP2 programming language. Derivations such as QA4, Coniver, Picolisp, and Ether were important tools in artificial intelligence research in the 1970s, which influenced commercial development such as Knowledge Engineering Environment or KEE and Automated Reasoning Tool or ART. PLEX. PLEX, or Programming Language for Exchanges, is a special-purpose, concurrent real-time programming language. The proprietary PLEX was developed by Goran Hemda at Ericsson in the 1970s, and it has been continuously evolving since then. PLEX was described in 2008 as a cross between Fortran and a macro assembler. The language has two variants: PLEX-C, used for the AXE Central Processor or CP, and PLEX-M, used for Extension Module Regional Processors or EMRP. PLEXIL. PLEXIL, or Plan Execution Interchange Language, is an open-source technology for automation. Created and currently in development by NASA, PLEXIL is a programming language for representing plans for automation. LAS. LAS is a Pascal-like system implementation language from the University of British Columbia or UBC, Canada, based on the SUE system language developed at the University of Toronto since 1971. There is another programming language named PLAS, developed at Sperry Univac in Roosevelt, Minnesota, but the Univac PLAS is not the subject. PLAS was developed at the University of British Columbia or UBC Computing Center by Alan Ballard and Paul Wally for use with and for the development of the Michigan Terminal System or MTS. But the code generated by the compiler is not operating system dependent and so is not limited to use with or the development of MTS. POP11. POP11 is a reflective, incrementally compiled programming language with many of the features of an interpreted language. It is the core language of the POP-LOG programming environment, developed originally by the University of Sussex and recently in the School of Computer Science at the University of Birmingham, which hosts the main POP-LOG website. There is now also a GitHub POP-LOG site with the core source files. POP2. POP2, also referred to as POP2, is a programming language developed around 1970 from the earlier language POP1 developed by Robin Popstone in 1968, originally named COWSEL by Robin Popplestone and Rod Burstad at the University of Edinburgh. It drew roots from many sources, the languages Lisp and Algol 60 and theoretical ideas from Peter J. Landy. It is used as an incremental compiler, which gave it some of the flexibility of an interpreted language, including allowing new function definition at runtime and modification of function definitions when a program was running, both of which are features of dynamic compilation without the overhead of an interpreted language. PostScript. PostScript or PS is a page description language in the electronic publishing and desktop publishing business. It is a dynamically typed, concatenative programming language. It was created at Adobe Systems by John Warnock, Charles Getch, Doug Brooks, Ed Tuck, and Bill Paxton from 1982 to 1984. Portable. Amiga E, or very often simply E, is a programming language created by Otto van Almersen on the Amiga. He has since moved on to develop the Shift programming language for the new Amiga DE platform and the CryScript language, also known as DOG, used during the development of the video game Far Cry. Amiga E is a combination of many features from a number of languages, but follows the original C programming language most closely in terms of basic concepts. Amiga E's main benefits are fast compilation, allowing it to be used in place of a scripting language, very readable source code, flexible type system, powerful module system, exception handling, not C++ variant, and object-oriented programming. POV-Ray SDL. The persistence of Vision Ray Tracer, most commonly acronymed as POV-Ray, is a cross-platform ray tracing program that generates images from a text-based scene description. It was originally based on DKBTrace, written by David Kirkbrooke and Aaron A. Collins for Amiga computers. There are also influences from the earlier Polar ray tracer because of contributions from its author, Alexander Eastman. POV-Ray is free and open source software with the source code available under the AGPLB tree. Powerhouse. Powerhouse is a trademark name for a byte-compiled fourth-generation programming language, or 4GL, originally produced by Quasar Corporation, later renamed Cognos Incorporated, for the Hewlett-Packard HP 3000 mini-computer, as well as Data General and DEC-VAX PMS computing products. PowerBuilder 4GL GUI application generator from Sybase. PowerBuilder is an integrated development environment owned by SAP since the acquisition of Sybase in 2010. On July 5, 2016, SAP and Appian entered into an agreement whereby Appian would be responsible for developing, selling, and supporting PowerBuilder. PowerShell. PowerShell is a task automation and configuration management framework from Microsoft, consisting of command line shell and the associated scripting language. Initially a Windows component only, known as Windows PowerShell, it was made open source and cross-platform on August 18, 2016 with the introduction of PowerShell Core. The former is built on the .NET Framework, the latter on .NET Core. PPL. The Polymorphic Programming Language, or PPL, was developed in 1969 at Harvard University by Thomas A. Standish. It is an interactive, extensible language with a base similar to the language APL. Processing. Processing is an open-source graphical library and integrated development environment, or IDE, built for the electronic arts, new media art, and visual design communities with the purpose of teaching non-programmers the fundamentals of computer programming in a visual context. Processing uses the Java language with additional simplifications, such as additional classes and alias, mathematical functions, and operations. It also provides a graphical user interface for simplifying the compilation and execution stage. The processing language and IDE have been the precursor to other projects including Arduino Wiring and P5.js. Processing.js. Processing.js is a JavaScript port of Processing, a programming language designed to write visualizations, images, and interactive content. It allows web browsers to display animations, visual applications, games, and other graphically rich content without the need for a Java applet or Flash plugin. Processing.js was originally created to allow existing processing developers and existing code to work unmodified on web. Processing.js used JavaScript to render 2D and 3D content in the HTML canvas element and was supported by browsers that have implemented this element, in the latest versions of Mozilla Firefox, Opera, Internet Explorer, Safari, and Google Chrome. Prograph. Prograph is a visual object-oriented data flow multi-paradigm programming language that uses iconic symbols to represent actions to be taken on data. Commercial Prograph software development environments such as Prograph Classic and Prograph CPX were available for the Apple Macintosh and Windows platforms for many years but were eventually withdrawn from the market in the late 1990s. Support for the Prograph language on macOS has recently reappeared with the release of the Martin software development environment. PRO4. The PROIV is a low-code development platform developed and sold by Northgate Awinsoft, part of the Northgate Information Solutions Group. It has an active community of around 2,500 developers and end users worldwide, ranging from consultants to large multinationals, finance institutions, tax authorities, retailers, engineering companies, media operators, and software houses. Pro4 was developed by Sushil K. Garg, working in Hawaii in 1976 on General Automation System. In the early 1980s, it was licensed to McDonnell Information Systems or MDIS. Project Verona. Project Verona is an experimental research programming language developed by Microsoft and aimed at dealing with memory situations to make other programming languages safer. The project is being supported by C# project manager Mads Torgensen and Microsoft Research Cambridge Research software engineer Juliana Franco. Project Verona is also being aided by academics at Imperial College London. Unlike in Rust, where the owner model based on a single object, it is based on groups of objects in Verona. According to Microsoft, the goal of the project is to create a safer platform for memory management. Project Verona is open source, released under MIT license, and is under active development on GitHub. Prolog. Prolog is a logic programming language associated with artificial intelligence and computational linguistics. Prolog has its roots in first-order logic, and unlike many other programming languages, Prolog is intended primarily as a declarative programming language. The programming language is expressed in terms of relations represented as facts and rules. A computation is initiated by running a query over these relations. The language was developed and implemented in Marseille, France in 1972 by Alain Colmirer with Philippe Russell based on Robert Kowalski's procedural interpretation of Horn clauses. PROMAL. PROMAL, or Programmer's Micro-Application Language, is a structured programming language from Systems Management Associates for MS-DOS, Commodore 64, and Apple II. PROMAL features simple syntax, no line numbers, long variable names, functions, and procedures with argument passing, real number type arrays, strings pointer, and a built-in input-output library. Like ABC in Python, indentation is part of the language syntax. Promela. Promela, or Process or Protocol Meta Language, is a verification modeling language introduced by Gerard J. Halsman. The language allows for the dynamic creation of concurrent processes to model, for example, distributed systems. In Promela models, communication via message channels can be defined to be synchronous or asynchronous. Promela models can be analyzed with the spin model checker to verify that the model system produces the desired behavior. An implementation verified with Isabel or SOL is also available. As part of the computer-aided verification of automata project, files written in Promela traditionally have a .pml file extension. Prose modeling language. Prose was the mathematical 4GL virtual machine which established the holistic modeling paradigm known as synthetic calculus, aka metacalculus. A successor to the SLAM or Q simulation and optimization language developed at TRW Systems. It was introduced in 1974 on control data supercomputers. It was the first commercial language to employ automatic differentiation or AD, which was optimized to loop in the instruction stack of the CDC 6600 CPU. PROTEL. PROTEL stands for Procedure-Oriented Type Enforcing Language. It is a programming language created by neural networks and used on telecommunication switching systems such as the DMS-100. PROTEL 2 is the object-oriented version of PROTEL. PROTEL languages were designed to meet the needs of digital telephony and is the basis of the DMS-100 LAN switching systems. PROTEL is a strongly typed block structured language which is based heavily on Pascal and Algo 68 with left-to-right style of variable assignment, variable size arrays, and extensible structures. The designers of PROTEL significantly extended Pascal of the day by adding external compilation extending the data structures available in the language. ProvideX. ProvideX is a computer language and development environment derived from business basic or business-oriented derivative of basics in the mid-1980s. ProvideX is available on several operating systems such as Unix, Linux, Windows, Mac OS X, and includes not only the programming language but also file system, presentation layer interface, and other components. The language is primarily designed for use in the development of business applications. Prose C++, also known as Pro-C, C++, is an embedded SQL programming language used by Oracle database DBMSys. Pro-C uses either C or C++ as its host language. During compilation, the embedded SQL statements are interpreted by a pre-compiler and replaced by C or C++ functions calls to their respective SQL library. The output from the Pro-C pre-compiler is standard C or C++ code that is then compiled by any one of several C or C++ compilers into an executable. Pure, successor to the equational language Q, is a dynamically typed functional programming language based on term rewriting. It has facilities for user-defined operator syntax, macros, arbitrary precision arithmetic, or multiple precision numbers, and compiling to native code through the LLVM. Pure is free and open source software distributed mostly under the GNU Lesser General Public License version 3 or later. Pure Data. Pure Data or PD is a visual programming language developed by Miller Pocket in the 1990s for creating interactive computer music and multimedia works. While Pocket is the main author of the program, PD is an open source project with a large developer base working on new extensions. It is released under a license similar to the BSD license. It runs on GNU or Linux, Mac OS X, iOS, Android, and Windows. Ports exist for FreeBSD and iRex. PureScript. PureScript is a strongly typed, purely functional programming language that compiles to JavaScript. It can be used to develop web applications, server-side apps, and also desktop applications with use of Electron. Its syntax is mostly comparable to that of Haskell. In addition, it introduces row polymorphism and extensible records. Also, contrary to Haskell, PureScript adheres to a strict evaluation strategy. PureScript was initially designed by Phil Freeman in 2013. He started to work on PureScript as various attempts to compile Haskell to JavaScript while preserving its semantics, like using FAHAST or GHC.js, which didn't work to his satisfaction. Python. Python is an interpreted, high-level, and general-purpose programming language. Python's design philosophy emphasizes code readability with its notable use of significant white space. Its language constructs an object-oriented approach aimed to help programmers write clear, logical code for small and large-scale projects. Python was created in the late 1980s and first released in 1991 by Guido van Rossum as a successor to the ABC programming language. That's all for the discussion about programming language. Let's start with letter P. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.